Hey guys, Kevin is my for Fargo Season 2, Episode 2, Before the Law, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. Last week's premiere was fantastic. I already feel they have potential, like I said, to, I think, beat the first season. It just seems like they already are going in that direction, where they know what they're doing, and this episode I thought was just as great. I'm really loving it, I have to say. I mean, this was a really great episode. It was longer, but it had to be. I feel like they had to stretch it out to tell the story they want to tell because we're really focusing on three different stories here and they all connect, yes, but right now at least it's separate. Kind of like how the first season was, where we had a few different stories and they all connected. That's very much how this season is, and I really like that. But let's get into this episode. There's a lot to talk about and a lot of interesting stuff in just this episode alone. So right in the beginning, we once again see that they remind us this is a true story, but names have been changed at the request of their survivors, and we get what's kind of like an opening credit sequence of kind of seeing what all the characters are doing, in the daily goings on of their life, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if they're gonna do that, all season, but if they do, that's gonna be really cool. And we see a dead pig as well, but the way they just typed it across the screen, and then we see everything, what everyone's doing. Like Peggy is washing her hair. Joe is with some gangsters that are up to no good. It shows different things that everyone's doing, and I definitely like seeing that. I think that definitely is very interesting. So in the opening, we basically see Joe and his men, and of course we know Joe. We got that great cliffhanger last week where we realized that Joe, they're going after the Gerhardt family, and of course in order to do that, he and his men getting frisked outside of a home that belongs to the Gerhardt family. And inside, Floyd Gerhardt is counting and stacking large sums of money, and you can already tell that she right away is getting right into that position of taking over the family. I mean, of course, they don't know that Rise is dead. They don't realize that, and what happened to him, and they don't realize that yet, but they're gonna find that out, and she's gonna take over. And for right now, she is the one taking over, and Jean Smart in this episode was just great. She really was fantastic. She's counting large sums of money, and instead the head of Fargo's Gerhardt crime family, at least while her husband Otto recuperates from a deliberating stroke. And I like seeing her take over. I think it definitely is very interesting. So Floyd hands the cash off and tells her grandson to gather up his dad and uncles, and first he finds Bear Gerhardt, and Dodd Gerhardt is a little busy inside the barn telling a story to a man who's strapped to a chair, and it's hard for the guy to listen though because his ears are in a bucket on the floor, which I thought was pretty funny, and also he's dead. This show is such dark humor, but they use it so well, and something I love about the show is that they always find ways to just incorporate really dark humor in situations that probably shouldn't be humorous but are, and that's why it works so well for Fargo, and that's a great example of that. I mean, they're telling this story to this guy, and they're like, I don't think he can hear us, and they realize that he got his ears cut off, and he's probably dead too, so, I mean, it was very funny, and I love that. I mean, any other show would make a big deal out of it, but the fact this show didn't, that's what's great. I love that about Fargo. And it definitely is the perfect tone for Fargo. That's something I love about the season. That's not pulling a True Detective 2, season 2, where it's just extremely dark. It's not that at all. It has humor in there, but it does have some dark scenes in there, and I'll get into that. They walk back into the house, and they pass by Joe and a very smelly Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers, and needless to say, Dodd doesn't return the pleasantries. It didn't work out well for him. And inside the house, Dodd finds that Joe and his gang are, and once again, we get about, I'd say, 15 minutes without seeing our main characters. And I don't know if that's going to be a regular thing, but I think it's really interesting because it's kind of like we got the prologue to every single, it's kind of like a prologue to every episode. And I understand that, the crime is a big part of the season, but of course our main character is Gus, and I think it was interesting that we didn't, not Gus, I mean Lou. Gus was last year. Lou is our main character, of course, and I thought it was interesting that we didn't see him here. But inside the house, Dodd finds out that Joe and his gang are part of a Kansas City crime syndicate, which is out looking for the Gerhardt family, and it sounds like a good time to get out with what Otto being sick and all, and Dodd appoints himself to be the new leader and says he's not having any of this, and the rest of the family seems to think that Floyd should be taking the reins, and we kind of got a bit of a power struggle going on here. Dodd really thinks that he's good, but the family's already appointed Floyd to take over, and I think it does make sense. I mean, she seems like she knows what she's doing, but Dodd seems to know what he's doing too. So I think it's interesting to see I think there's gonna be some friction between Dodd and Floyd here, which I think is definitely gonna be very interesting for us to get into. I hope they go more into that. So Floyd and Dodd have a private meeting where she gives him a little lesson in Gerhardt history and how an empire works, and she says that his time will come, but that day is not today, and she then has to see her youngest son, Rye, and of course, she doesn't realize that he's dead yet, and that's really all basically, she doesn't know that Rye's dead yet, and I think that definitely is very interesting. She, of course, is going to find out, but she doesn't know that yet. So, meanwhile, Joe and Mike are wondering about Rye's whereabouts as well because they want to see if he can be swayed to sell. First, Gearhart to switch side, gets his shiny red apple, and that basically is what he tells them. Because obviously, Joe wants to get a Gearhart on his side to basically turn against the Gearharts, which I think is very interesting the way he's going to use the Gearharts. I was thinking that Joe was just going to go after them and be like a killing machine, but no, he's doing this in a way where he's going to manipulate them and kind of divide the family, which I think is very interesting. The person I think he's going to do that with is Dodd. Dodd is the perfect person to do that because Dodd wants to take over, and he's not going to be able to because, of course, Floyd has taken over, and I feel like Joe's going to try to get Dodd because Dodd would probably go because obviously Dodd wants power, and I feel like Joe would give him that power even though is essentially screwing his family over, which I think is definitely very interesting, and I hope we get more into that because that's very interesting. So at the police station, we see a lot more of Hank in this episode, which we didn't see a lot of Hank last week, but we do see a lot more of him in this one. And Hank is looking through paperwork. He picks up a white shoe that's sitting on his desk, and of course, it belongs to Ryan, who was seen hanging from the tree last week. And they're just trying to figure out what this shoe means, because obviously, a shoe in a tree, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really is. And the scene then jumps to Laverne, Minnesota, where Hank having breakfast with his family, which includes Betsy and Lou and Molly, which I thought was great. And they remind us that Lou is a state trooper Vietnam vet and a and I thought that was interesting when we found that out. And there's this great scene where he's sitting with Molly and she's asking him to tell her a story. It's a really great scene. I definitely really liked it. It was very funny. And again, I just like seeing Molly as a little girl. It's interesting to see, and it's something that we haven't seen. I think it's interesting that they're doing that. So next we see a gaping bloody hole in the side of the car. It's parked inside the Bloomquist garage, and I gotta say, Ed and Peggy are quickly becoming my favorite part of this show. I love their dynamic on this show. They're great, and I think they're probably going to become my favorite characters. Right outside, just past a bloody handprint, sits Ed Bloomquist leafing through a wallet, and it belongs to Rye. And obviously, he doesn't know what to do with this wallet because, well, one, Rye's dead. Two, this is complete evidence that, one, they know what happened to Rye. Two, that they killed Rye, so he has to figure out what to do with this. And a few flashbacks seem to confirm that, including one that shows Ed and his wife Peggy throwing the guy's body into a cooler. So, again, he wasn't dead, but they made sure they're just the way they're making him, covering this up is very interesting. First they threw him into a lake, now they're throwing him into a cooler, and I think it's very funny the way they're doing that. But of course, they're trying to approach this in the best way possible. But like I said, I still feel like Peggy has a darker agenda. You really see that in this episode when Peggy's out on her own, which I'll get into that. But back at the Gerhardt house, Dodd sits and thinks about his destiny. He then talks to his right-hand man, Hansy, about finding Rye, and he, again, doesn't realize that Rye is dead. So obviously it's not going to work out well. But when Dodd is thinking about his destiny, again, I really feel that he's going to be approached by Joe, because I think it definitely is very interesting, and I feel really bad for Dodd. Honestly, Dodd I felt really bad for, because obviously he wants to be in power, but he doesn't have any power right now, and it kind of sucks, but he doesn't have any power. So Peggy wants to proceed as if it's business as usual. She gets the bus off of Lynn Laverne and informs the butcher shop that her husband won't be at work today, and she then heads off to her job as a beautician. And I thought it was interesting that we saw that she's now this beautician, and we realize that she actually wants the butcher shop as well. She wants to work in it with Ed. They want to take over. And she tries to be, Peggy in this episode tries to be as not suspicious as possible. But there are definitely some things she does in this episode that are very questionable and definitely, I think, are definitely going to get people talking. Not people, I'm talking about, I'm talking about people in the show. Not people, who watch the episode, but it's going to get a lot of people talking, and it definitely is very interesting. So Joe, Mike, and the Kitchen Brothers stop into Watson's Typewriters, where the owner's on the phone yelling that he has the money, and this is a rare example of how the show can actually be really intense. I mean, again, the show can be very funny at times, but it also can be very intense, and this is the perfect example of that, because this was actually quite a crazy scene, and I really loved it, I have to say. Mike asks about the call and proceeds to say he's interested in Rye Gerhardt. Mike, being the smiley, helpful guy that he is, wants to help jog the guy's memory. So he grabs his tie, shoves it into a typewriter, and it was pretty crazy when he did that. I didn't know what was going to happen to this guy, especially after the massacre we had in the diner scene. I mean, it seemed like the Gerhardts are very powerful, and it really seemed like they had a dark agenda. And he holds him that way while calmly expressing his needs. And the story includes Mike typing away, choking the guy just a little with every keystroke. And it's funny, but it's also really brutal. And apparently, this and pulling out his pinky finger is pretty painful. The guy's screaming out something about the judge, and they leave with this information. So they did get the information that they need. They tortured a guy in the process, and that was a pretty awesome scene. Even though it was pretty brutal, again, this is Fargo, so it's not as brutal as it would be on other shows, and that's something I liked. I thought it was definitely actually pretty funny. I enjoyed that overall. So they get the necessary information that they need, and I'm happy that they got it, because obviously they needed that information. But the thing is with this guy, I think it definitely is very interesting the way they're going around and doing this, just, torturing these people. It's very interesting. So inside the Bloomquist garage, Ed scrubs the car, bleaches blood off the floor, peeks in a very dead Rye inside the cooler, and it seems like we're going to see Rye a lot, because definitely it seems like we're going to see him a lot, dead most likely, but it seems like we're going to see him a lot, and that's a way to keep him on the show. It's kind of disgusting and sick that they're doing that, but again, the whole storyline revolves around them trying to cover up his murder, so they're doing whatever they can to hide him, and I feel like we're going to check on his dead body a lot, and by the end of the season, he's going to look very, very disgusting, because obviously he's going to be decayed, but that's how it's going to be, and I think that definitely is very interesting, because again, other shows probably wouldn't do that. Other shows would just be like, okay, we're not going to see him for a while, but this is a show that, no, they're going to show, if they keep showing his decayed body, his body, and get it, and make it look, and, have it get more and more decrepit, and, disgusting as the season goes on, that could be very funny. I'm definitely hoping they do that. But the scene with Ed scrubbing the car was very interesting. You can see how much this affects him, and I have to say, Jesse Plemons is doing an amazing job in this show, really. He really is fantastic, and he's so much not like Lester. He's just trying to do what's right. Lester did sort of, but Lester was kind of a loser, but I don't really think Ed is. I think Ed's just trying to do what's right, and he doesn't really know what to do in this situation, which is honestly understandable. So next we see Betsy. She's getting a blood transfusion. It's really sad because we know that she's probably going to die. And a second later, she's in a car with Lou and the young daughter Molly. And the three pull into a Waffle Hut, which looks to be close up. And a killing spree will typically do that to obviously the killing spree happened, which they know about. And Lou goes in to investigate and finds the can of bug spray that the Jug wielded as a weapon to Rye. So one by one, he's starting to get some more clues here. Obviously, we know that this all started with the can of bug spray, so he definitely is starting to find out what's going on. But what I like is that they are taking it quite slow. I like that they're not rushing it by any means. In fact, we do just start to get some clues, but not much. In the parking lot, basically, Betsy and Molly, they're building a snowman. It's, again, really nice to see Molly as a little girl. It's something I'm not used to, but I'm slowly getting used to it, and that's something I like the show is doing. We're only 2 episodes in, but I'm already getting used to seeing Molly as this little girl, and she finds this old foil balloon, which is covered by a gun that's been buried in the snow, and we don't know how it got there, obviously, because we didn't see what happened after Rye died. I don't believe Rye had something to do with that, though. The three stand there, and Mike and the twins drive by, give them some serious stink eye, and you can definitely tell that Mike and the twins are thinking that these detectives are connected to what's been going on. I really feel that things are not going to end well for Lou and his family in this situation. Mike and the twins are definitely going to go after him. I definitely don't see things going well for them, because obviously they're probably thinking that they're responsible for this when obviously they're not, but I'm starting to think, they definitely in their heads are thinking, ooh, they might actually be, they might actually think they are responsible for this, which I think is interesting. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But basically, I don't think things are going to end up well for in the world of for things in the world of Lou and his family. I wish I could say they are, but it doesn't seem like that's the way it's going. So Mike and the Kitchen Brothers end up at a roadblock where Hank takes down the car's license plate number, and Mike rolls down the block window, which doesn't please Hank too much. He asks all of them to get out of the car and produce IDs, and Mike assures Lou that they are just passing through town in search of waffles, and I mean, again, Hank's just trying to get the necessary information he needs. At this point, everyone's a suspect, and they don't know who it is. And Lou asks about their shoe sizes, and Mike says he's a 10, and they're asking why this matters. And obviously, they don't know about the shoe in the tree. They don't know that Rye's dead. And I feel like a lot of this season is going to be a huge misunderstanding that Mike and the brothers are going to think that they took Rye or something bad happened to Rye or that they had something against Rye, and they're not going to know that Rye is dead, and that's going to be very interesting to see how they portray this. It's either go in a really funny direction or it could go in a really dark direction. You never know with Fargo, which is something I really like. So Mike says he's a 10. The Kitchen Brothers each put up a middle finger, which Mike says actually means that they're a pair of 11s. And I love the joke with the Flintstones. That was just, it was so random, but it was so great when he's like, oh, is this like the Flintstones? I thought that was so funny, and I love that. It was such a random joke, but it worked so well, and I definitely really loved seeing that, and I really like that. I do worry for Hank, though. I have to say, I definitely do worry for Hank because we didn't see him last season. I don't think things are gonna end up well for Hank because obviously we know Lou's not gonna die, but Hank, I think he might die. I honestly do. I don't see things going well there. We also see that Rye is no longer on ice at home. He's now in the back of Ed's truck. He's not in the cooler. And he's now taken Rye to the butcher shop, and he's probably going to chop up Rye's body, which is really disturbing. But again, there's certain things you have to, you have to put yourself in this position of him having to do whatever he can to cover this murder up and to defend Ed. I'm not saying what he's doing is right, but Ed's just trying to do the right thing and is trying to do whatever he can to cover up this murder. And a way to do that is to do some disgusting things, which is probably uh, chop up Ed. I wouldn't be surprised if he chops up Ed and feeds his meat to other people. It's really sick, but I really feel that's what's going to happen there. So Peggy gets a ride home from her boss, Constance, and this was really interesting. You can definitely tell that Constance is on to Peggy. She's pretty nervous too. She not only does she know that Rye's no longer on the premises, but her bathroom is packed with a lifetime supply of toilet paper that she swiped from work. So Peggy's even more worried about what's going on with Ed, especially now that Constance is both seeing the crash car and the bruise on Peggy's face, and Constance is definitely on to Peggy. She does not trust her whatsoever, which is not going to end well for Peggy at all. And she's saying, I'm usually able to tell you right away, but you had me fooled. And I don't, things are not going to go well for Peggy. I wish I could say they are, but, Peggy, I feel like has a good agenda here. And Constance says, she's just messing with her. But again, it just seems like Constance is already on her and sort of already can tell what she's doing. I think it definitely is going to be very interesting to see what happens there. We get this really great scene as well between Hank and Lou, and it really shows the bonding that these two have. You really do believe that these two are, father-in-law and son-in-law. It's really interesting to see, Lou tells this story to Hank. I don't really remember what it was about, but it was a really nice scene. I like the bonding between them, and I hope we get more of that because it's something we haven't seen before, obviously, and that's one of the reasons why I like this season. Because, again, we've seen Lou as a character. We're just expanding on him. We're expanding on his relationships with his family, and a way to do that is to show Hank. And Hank is a character that I don't think is going to make it. I do think Hank is probably going to die, but I do think it's interesting to see these scenes between Hank and Lou, and I hope we get more of that, definitely. I hope that continues. So, but then the ending of this episode was very interesting, very intense, and I really love the ending, I have to say. It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes, because Ed doesn't have Lou fooled at all. He's at the butcher shop after hours, using the equipment to make Rye into tomorrow's ground meat special, and Rye's fingers go flying across the floor, and Lou then knocks at the door, and he says, that he needs bacon, but you can tell that he's already on to Ed, and just as he's about to find one of those fingers, the phone rings, and Betsy saves the day, and her husband too. Peggy saves the day. Because Lou says, okay, if you have to make a call, I'll go away, and you can tell that Lou is on him, though. I don't think that Lou is stupid. He's obviously not stupid. He can tell there's something more going on here, and for right now, at least, Peggy saved Ed's ass, but it's not going to end that way. It's not going to end up well for them, and that definitely is going to be very interesting. So that's basically how this episode ends. And overall, guys, I thought this was a fantastic episode. I really loved it. I already feel like I know these characters, really. Just from these first two episodes, I feel like we know the characters, we know the environment of this show, and that's something I love. I want to know how this show is going to be, and I really am loving where this show is going. And there are a lot of really interesting things introduced in this episode. Let's first talk about the murders, because obviously we're starting to get more into the murders, obviously. I really don't think things are going to end well for Hank because obviously I feel like the brothers are going to target Hank, Lou, and all of them because they're going to think that they may be kidnapped, Rye, because obviously they don't know that Rye is dead, which is going to be really sad when they find out that Rye is dead. Because of course Rye died because of his rage and that he was going through so much. You really did feel bad for him. And when the brothers find out, it's going to be really sad, and definitely I'm going to feel bad for them. But if they kill Hank, I might not feel as bad because I don't want them to kill Hank. It's all going to be a misunderstanding, and I don't think things are going to end well for really anybody in that sense, and that's going to be really bad for Hank and everyone. I really hope things go well there, but I don't think they're going to. Um, like I said with Dodd, I think Dodd is going to be approached by he's going to be approached by Joe, because Joe, of course, doesn't know that Rye's dead. Again, he doesn't know that Rye's dead either. They didn't see him die, and basically, uh, they're trying to figure out what's going to happen with him. So I'm thinking that Joe's going to try to recruit Dodd because Dodd obviously wanted to be the leader of the gangsters, the leader of the mafia, but now his mother is, and he's probably really pissed about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Joe is able to convince him to ally with them, which I think is going to be very interesting to see what they do with that. And if they do, that could be very interesting to see where they go with that, because I'm definitely interested in seeing what could happen with Dodd. Again, it's a character we don't know too much about, but we know just enough about him to get invested in him. Peggy and Ed, they're doing some really sick things with and I'm not saying sick like cool, like legitimately doing some really sick things, of course, with Rye's body, and I don't know how this is going to work. Obviously, Constance is on to Peggy. Whether Peggy thinks she might be joking or not and might not think of it as a big deal, she's probably just like, oh, this is nothing. She's on to her. She's on to her. Peggy should be worried, and I don't think things are going to go well for Peggy and Ed. You can only cover this up as much as you can only cover this up for so long. It's not going to last as long as they wanted to. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that, oh, this is going to work out well, but I don't think it's going to. I really don't. I don't think that Peggy and Ed are going to get out of this. One of them is definitely going to die. Peggy seems to know what she's doing more than Ed does. Peggy seems like, and it makes sense because Peggy's the one that hit him with the car. She seems like she has a really executed plan, and it might not necessarily include Ed. I feel like her plan doesn't even include Ed. It just includes her surviving, and it's very selfish, but again, she's the one that did this, and I feel like she just has the better plan than Ed does. Which we'll have to see what happens with that, but definitely Lou's going after Ed without a doubt. He's not going to forget what he saw with Ed. He definitely is going to start to be suspicious about what's going on with Ed. What I'm thinking though is that he's going to think that Ed is the one that killed that Ed is the one that killed Rye, and he essentially did, was Peggy and Ed that did it. They both should be arrested, obviously, but I don't want them to be arrested because I really like their characters and I hope things go well for them. But of course, they did do something wrong, so I can understand, of course, if they do get arrested, why it happens, because of course, they did something wrong. They should be arrested for it. If we keep seeing Rye's decayed body, like I said, that will be very funny if that happens. But it looks like next week, Betsy's really going to try to get them to figure out the case more, and she's going to start to say, maybe the shoes have something to do with it. Because right now, they don't fully understand and we don't understand either, what is the gun about? Why is there a gun in a balloon? We don't know how that got there. We don't know why that's there. What exactly is going on there? I mean, we know some things, but we don't know why the gun's there, and we don't know what happened after Peggy hit Rye with the car. Honestly, that's all we know is that Rye died getting hit, we thought died getting hit by the car, and that's it. So that's really all we know. I think he hid the gun there. I'm assuming he did. I'm not really sure. I don't remember. I don't think we saw him hide the gun. He might have, but we'll have to see what happens with that, because that's going to be very interesting to see where they go with that. That's going to be very interesting as well. I'm loving the character of Mike. I think he is hilarious. I love his character. Very much a Sam Jackson. I'm definitely getting some Sam Jackson vibes from his character. Like I said, this already feels very much like Pulp Fiction. You got Peggy and Ed very much like that couple in Pulp Fiction. You know what couple I'm talking about. The one that poisons people. That's what I'm thinking of. Then you have Hank and Lou, which are very much like John Travolta and Sam Jackson. And then you have all the crime stuff going on, which is very much like all the, crime characters in the movie, and I really, really love that, I have to say. It's great, and I don't know if it was intentional, but it very much is like Pulp Fiction. I'm really loving that, and I hope they keep that going, and I hope they keep the momentum of these episodes going too, because I'm really getting into this, I have to say. I'm really loving it. It's one of the best things I'm watching on TV right now, definitely. I already feel like they're going to top the first season just from these 2 episodes. I can already tell they're going to. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I thought this was a great episode. I really loved it. I'm really loving the show so far, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Awkward, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.